welcome to the first workshop of Living Unlimited. Your hosts for today are Stephanie Anderson and Christian Michael. In each of these workshops, we will present ways to identify areas that will impact your ability to have a successful human function. Today, we're going to talk about ways to improve memory, that is, auditory memory, because what you hear is what you get. The brain hears a sound, processes it, and stores it before it can respond. That process is what we're meaning by auditory processing. Let's watch a demonstration of two different ways to process that you may have witnessed before.
All right, what would you like to order today?
I would like a cheeseburger, no bun, no tomatoes, Diet Coke, no ice. Oh, and the beef barley soup, wait, no, let me have a salad instead.
So you want a hamburger, extra bun, tomatoes with ice, and the barley beef soup?
No, think about all the pieces of that order. The waiter needed to remember that there was a main dish, a cheeseburger, no bun, no tomato. Also need to remember there was no ice with a diet drink, and she changed her mind after he already got the barley soup. So there's a lot of pieces of information in that. So let's try that again with Christian with better auditory processing.
All right, what would you like to order today?
I would like a cheeseburger without a bun, no tomatoes. I'm trying low carb. Diet Coke with no ice. And beef barley soup, you said? No. Let me have the salad instead.
All right, so it looks like you want a cheeseburger, no bun, no tomatoes, Diet Coke, no ice, and salad. Would you like Thousand Island or ranch or Italian with that? Or
ranch is great.
All right.
Thank you. Or maybe you've been an employee who had to deal with someone with low auditory processing.
Well, there will be situations if you've ever been in customer service and you've worked with customers troubleshooting and taking orders, where you'll be standing there and you'll ask them what they'd like to order. And they will literally stare at you like a cow for like 5 minutes straight, wondering what the heck they want. And you can offer them, oh, why don't you just have a cheeseburger? And they'll be like, okay. And then you ask them if they want it with cheese or not, and then they'll stare at you for another 5 minutes. It's an example. It's just a minor tick, a little symptom of sometimes an underdeveloped memory or just memory that hasn't been exercised enough yet. People who are seasoned in the industry or in customer service are usually good at retaining that much information. But most of the people you see usually haven't been quite adapted to that yet.
So teachers, employers, students, parents, everyone can benefit from awareness of what auditory processing is. One important way we can improve right away is by thinking before we're going to let loose with a lot of syllables. Say what's the most important first. And repeat back what we hear, like you heard the waiter repeating it back. It's just good practice while we're developing auditory processing. If you're emotional or you're in an emotional situation, just remember that auditory processing drops to another area of the brain. Be very aware of that. It takes a little bit more to remember. Like the Earth, our brain has two hemispheres with different regions and atmospheres. Music stimulates one hemisphere, while the other analyzes and organizes language tones. Sorry. Words and numbers. When our goal is to improve the language center of the brain, we would choose audiobooks or read aloud without music. And that way the auditory nervous system in the brain focuses entirely on language and language tones. That's not all the time, but it is some of the time. So now Christian's going to demonstrate one of those exercises that's really good to improve auditory processing, and it's just reading. But first, let's read a few sentences as an example of what not to do.
So a lot of people you talk to a lot of the times or you listen to when they're like in an audiobook or reading to their kids, they'll start reading in kind of a low monotone, like For example, right, Leo said, could you be more specific on the whatever it is part? Like a vapor trail, Jason said, except it's glowing, really faint, but it's definitely there. We've been following it since Chicago, so I figured you saw it. This is an example of something that you would hear like at your chemistry class while the professor is rambling on in the background and you are formulating a grocery list in your head while he's going on and on about something.
If you were bored, chances are the person listening is also bored. So choose interesting material. And if your listener's younger, use a lot of intensity, voice inflection, and keep it a short duration. Now let's do a good example.
So if you want to engage your audience or you want to really exercise areas of the brain, this, of course, not all people have like a taste for the theatrical, but to engage, it does help to make it more interesting, to even give voice to your characters or whatever if you're reading fiction. Just anything to make it more engaging, because the more boring you are, the harder it is already to retain information. But if you go into it, like, right, Leo said, could you be more specific on the whatever it is part? It's like a vapor trail, Jason said, except it's glowing, really faint, but it's definitely there. We've been following it since Chicago, so I figured you saw it. Leo shook his head. Maybe Festus can sense it. You think Aeolus made it? Well, it's a magic trail in the wind, Jason said. Aeolus is the wind god. I think he knows we've got prisoners for him. He's telling us where to fly. So, for example, just make it more interesting. It's easier to listen to.
There's some things to understand about auditory processing. The younger you are, the more intense, the more you need to keep your interests, and you need to keep it high, and you need to keep it short. So we're going to go ahead and give some tips on how to increase auditory processing. The auditory and visual systems have different areas in the brain where they receive, process, and store information. Make sure to unplug from visual for a minimum of 20 minutes each day. That's phones, computers, and television. The auditory system needs uninterrupted opportunity to process with no competition. It's also good to have periods where you have no noise, so the brain has a time to settle itself and all of the systems get a break. Now we're going to do something different. We're going to play a game that will give you a snapshot of auditory processing, and you will need a piece of paper and a writing tool. All right, so what we're going to do, we have some cards here that have numbers, sequences. Christian's going to demonstrate what the game is about. I'm going to read the sequence of numbers to him. He's going to do a couple of things. These are the rules. He's going to wait until I've finished the sequence before he tells me the numbers that I just said. When you're at home, you're going to take a piece of paper and a pencil. When I finish the sequence of numbers, I want you to write down what you heard. I'll show you the series of numbers, and then you can see how close you were. Are you ready, Christian? Mm-hmm. So we're going to start with a very simple one. We're going to start with 5 numbers, okay? So the first sequence is 6, 8, 4, 9, 1.
6, 8, 4, 9, 1.
So hopefully you received 6, 8, 4, 9, 1. Let's go to the next one. Now there's a cheating method that some of us use that I'm going to cover this time, and that is I'm going to cover my mouth so you can't watch while I'm saying the numbers. A lot of people will know how to lip read and fill those blanks in when they can't hear. So let's start with the next. Again, we're just going to do 5. 7, 3, 8, 1, 6.
7, 3, 8, 1, 6.
So hopefully you wrote down 7, 3, 8, 1, 6. Seems simple, but now we're going to go to 6 numbers. Let's see how you do. 9, 3, 2, 4, 470.
932470.
So hopefully you got 932470. All right, so you can do this game. Once you find out what you're actually processing at, you would know, okay, I can do 5 really easy. Keep in mind you're cheating if you switched any of those numbers. If you were chunking in your head and saying, oh, I've got 397, 39743. Those are all chunking and mechanisms we use to cope.
You know, one of the easiest ways to chunk together numbers that she was talking about, especially once you get to 7 digits, and you'll notice this just kicks in instinctively. You'll automatically just start making it a phone number. Like 7 numbers, you'll get 3 and then 4, and then you'll just immediately be like 406, 478. You know, you'll just immediately go into that mode. That is an example of chunking that is very hard to break, let me tell you.
Yeah, you're making 4 numbers into one piece of information by doing that. So
Yeah.
what's interesting about the Witter, if you think he wasn't using numbers, numbers are actually small. Numbers are actually a piece of information that's random. But think about words. We're going to do the next exercise with words really quick. We're going to do just 3, and then we'll move to 4. This is a very simple exercise, but it's quite a bit more information when you're dealing with words. So our first sequence is hope, great, fact.
Hope, great, fact.
And so we have hope, great, fact. Okay, we're going to go to 4. Could just pride leave?
Could just pride leave?
Again, you got it right. Could just pride and leave. I've got the bottom one covered. Sorry. So if you imagine with the Witter, the amount of information he had to store and how we have to do that every day, if you are an employer or if you are a parent or if you're a teacher, we are not an auditory society. So when we're giving information, we have to remember that most of our children, most of our spouses, most of our students, most of our employees are actually processing more information visually. So there's a way to improve, but first you need to cope with where things are. Writing and giving visual instruction is very important if you want them to retain. So if you write it on the board, if they have an assignment, if you start using a chore chart, don't just use an auditory piece. Make sure you add that visual piece. But to improve, we want to talk about that. You can read in a music-free environment. Get an audio theater, get an audiobook series that doesn't use a lot of music. There's always an introduction, there's always that, and there's sound effects, but that's different than having music going on all through. The test that we shared is part of a free kit that we can send you in an article, which is at christianmichaelunlimited@gmail.com, and we'll send that to you. Christian's going to talk to you about another game you can use, and it's very effective when you're dealing with, I don't know, children up to 8 to 12. Of course, there are adults that like this game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the oldest time-tested games that hasn't really been taken very seriously is Simon Says. And I know a lot of people have heard of Simon Says and already know what it's about. But if you really break it down to an exercise, it's actually extremely effective. First of all, you're commanding attention at the very start by having people having to look at you, by having to observe your lips, your body language, and everything. And then once you start giving out commands, they immediately have to start working themselves to remember the sequence of commands that you're giving them. So, for example, if you're just standing there and they're watching you, and you say, you know, put your right hand on your right foot, or repeat after me, or anything. You could go to any level of commands, just as long as it's, you know, of course, possible. And whether or not they repeat after you is part of a really effective exercise. Because I'll find myself when I'm working with kids, you know, something as simple as stop, sit down. is already almost impossible. So the more you can work on it, the more you can develop them, get them used to those commands, and not just in, a game setting where you're just rambling different weird things, weird fun things for them to do. In an actual real life situation, even as adults, just simple commands like, with the waiter that we saw earlier, being able to memorize different parts of an order. It all adds up together to improving your memory for a long term.
That's right. When you are aware that you want to increase this, you can, with your children very young, start by adding more adjectives. Instead of saying, go get your truck, it's go get the red truck with the big wheels. Or roll the small red ball to mom. Or that is a pretty yellow and blue dress. For the younger children, that's teaching them to process more pieces of information right off the bat, even before they're verbal. You can start that. Be aware of just using a syllable or two more above where they're at. If you can tell that they're not doing 3 well, you probably don't want to go more than 4. So let's talk about teenagers, because there's a misconception. Some teenagers really can't process auditory information very well. They can process visually, they can play video games, but that's a different part of the brain. So let's say you have a child that walks in the door and you say, go upstairs, get your laundry, pack your bag, and get your shoes. And they disappear. How many pieces of information was that? Or maybe they just get their laundry and bring it back down, because that's all that they could hold together from an auditory standpoint. You're going to want to work on that by giving them those same instructions every day without an emotional attachment. If you want them to do more processing, give them what they can do and add a little bit. Understand that not all children are processing at the same level at school. If you're going to give them a long set of instructions like class, turn to chapter 14, page 176, and do only the odd numbers on the 3rd paragraph. Someone's going to be looking at their neighbor saying, chapter what? 14, page what? Or maybe they turn in the wrong homework assignment. So put it on the board. Make sure there's always a visual. For those that are processing at a low level, it's going to take them some time to learn how to process more information. As an employer or employee, husband, wife, parent, please remember, when emotions are high, your memory decreases because you actually go into the creative side, emotional side of your brain. You're not analyzing as many pieces of information. All right, so we're going to we've got some information and some cards that we'd like to send you and articles that are free. If you will contact us at christianmichaelunlimited@gmail.com, we can give you any of the articles on auditory processing to start, or the free kit. The brain is filtering thousands of pieces of information. It automatically decides what the importance is, such as loud, soft, outside, inside, alarms, singing, animals, insects, machines, and cars. They're filtered automatically like blinking or breathing. What we want you to do is be able to remember more of the pertinent information that you need to communicate well every day. Please contact us on email or Facebook, and join us next time to discover more opportunities to impact your ability to live unlimited.